Just kidding. Okay. Hello, everybody. Here we are. We are live. Also, Joe, to remind you that you have to switch your comments. In order to be able to see the comments, you have to switch over the comment thing to be able to see everyone else's comments. I forgot to remind you ahead of time. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Coffee Chats. We did not have like a list of questions prepared ahead of time. This is not like an interview. This is just us chatting, but Joe has a bunch of really great resources for people who are trying to become data analysts. And actually in my inbox for the last year, people have been like, hey, can you tell me how to become a data analyst? And I'm like, if you want to like have one concrete place to go, like Joe has that. And then I also just wrote a book and put all those things into a book. So I thought we could just talk about our content, like what we've written and, the process of it and kind of the big things that stick out. So is there anything, I have some questions that I could ask you, but is there anything that initially sticks out to you that you'd like to mention?
I think you're being very complimentary saying that I have a wealth of resources. I don't have anything initially off the bat. I think in terms of just like kicking things off, the stuff that we put together, and I mean I can only speak for myself, but I think this is probably true for any content creator that is out there in the data and analytics space. Is the stuff that we put together, we really learn more from it than most people would think. So for instance, I mean, I put together some of my initial works back almost a year ago now, like January, February of this year. And, ever since then, it's really been more of a learning experience from the people that have interacted with it, that I've interacted with to learn about it, and what that experience has brought to me. And so I think just being engaged and in that community that is active in the products that we make or create, or the content that we create, and just trying to learn from that community as well as bring them useful stuff at the same time it's a back and forth. Because I would say 2023 has probably been one of the biggest learning years, not just in data and analytics, but across a whole spectrum of different aspects of learning how social media works, learning the idea of marketing, learning the concepts, like different concepts within data and analytics. I mean, I taught myself Python early this year, and that's really been a game changer for me. And just seeing, and the other aspect is just seeing the drive that people on LinkedIn in particular, and within our communities that we have, that drive is an inspiration to me, because you can get comfortable, you can get complacent in the roles that you have and where you are, and you can coast. And coasting is never good. I've heard it said that if you're not going forward, you're going backwards, or on a more aggressive tone, if you're not going forward, you're dying. Whichever one you want to choose to live by, I firmly believe that if you aren't going forward in some manner, that you really do need to think about what you're doing and how you want to move forward. So that's basically like my initial kickoff, is just like the idea of creating content, the idea of creating resources for people to learn is really a back and forth road for both the creator and the person that consumes it. And I think that's probably been one of the most eye-opening things about doing that work is that experience around that.
Yeah, I totally agree. That kind of, I think that, I don't know if I would call it feedback or feed forward, but like what I really like about being content creators is that we can put out resources for people and we can say, well, here's a list of 20 things that helped me become a data analyst. And then we see month after month after month, people are like, oh, well, I'd really like to know about like tech interviews. And so then it's like, okay, well, I can put together a resource specifically about tech interviews. Can you tell us like what was the first thing that you made? Oh, I have to shut my LinkedIn. It also like noises at me. Can you tell me what was the first thing that you made? And then like you said like you kind of learned and like made more things. So like what was that feed forward? Like what other things did you make in sequence after your start?
Yeah, so the first thing I made was the data learning lab. So it was really just it started out as trying to come up with like a content creation strategy. So it was just basically collecting and like, um, what do I want to say? Just basically collecting free resources from across the internet, putting them into one large cohesive area that has an integrated notes application, and like I can build onto it as time goes on and change things around, and that was really where that all started. It was just I needed a strategy on content creation for LinkedIn. It just
Mhm.
happened to jive with something that I could put together and give to individuals that would help them find things more readily and be able to have one cohesive area to learn data and analytics based on the different categories. So whether it's SQL or Power BI, etc. Um, from there, I wrote the data analyst field manual, and that was really just the basic gist of it was just to be a resource that somebody could pick up, find, okay, what particular area do I need help in, whether it's the application cycle or the interview cycle or the first 90 days after you land a job, and not have to be able to read. Not You don't need to read the whole book front to back. You can easily just pick it up, reference um, that chapter, and then you can use that to help you with that certain situation. And those are the two primary resources that I put together. Um, uh, More recently, I launched just a clothing side hustle. So that's been an interest. It's not really like a learning experience, but it's one way to show that you're just a data nerd and you can geek out. My wife was getting annoyed with me because I was ordering all the test products to do the quality checks and make sure everything was good. And she's like, "So when are you gonna stop ordering all these shirts and stuff?" Because she's like, "It's starting to get pretty dorky at this point." so that's been interesting. People really like the Christmas sweater that was out there, and but again, it's another learning experience where it's not just like I'm not just out there making money for myself. And let me tell you, you don't make much money, but um, it's been just the whole concept of even with the clothing stuff. It's been interesting to see the different ways that you can do like a drop shipping type product, or how to deal with the taxes. And so these little side hustles that you come up with, it's just a plethora of learning experiences that just surround it. That it's fascinating to me to just you get tied into all that stuff. But yeah, so why don't you tell us about your stuff, Annie? Like what you've put together, what the inspiration was behind that. I mean, particularly your book that you're gonna be putting out here. I mean, it's pre-order. It's available for pre-order, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Before that, don't you have Notion templates? Because I feel like I have seen them and I've had like 5 different people mention to me that they like your Notion templates. That's you,
Yeah,
right? You have Notion templates?
the data learning lab. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just a Notion template. It's all just packaged in there. So that's why you have like the note taking along with just the free resources everything's just packaged nicely.
Yeah, I've
So
gotten good feedback on that. But yeah, so I think the first thing that I started with was after I finished the Google Certificates course back in 2022, I had put out this like massive GitHub file of like all the resources that I used while learning data analytics. I think there was probably resources that I used in the span where I was like job searching that didn't make it in there. And that was the first thing that I had for a while besides my like content on LinkedIn and TikTok. And then I ended up writing blogs. I had, like, been blogging about my journey, and I had kinda put some stuff out there. Um, and then I was thinking, like, "Okay, I would really like to, like, compile this," because you can see my entire journey on TikTok. You can see, like, when I was learning to write SQL for the first time. You can see, like, when I was getting rejected to jobs, and it's so funny to look back at those and be like, "Oh, yeah, my apartment was a disaster because I, like, was not taking care of myself at all because I was, like, really going through it." But you have to, like, scroll all the way back. So, like you said, if you wanna, like, get to one topic of, like, what are the stages of tech interviews, or, like, do I need to learn Python to become a data analyst? Because everyone has that question. Um, it's hard to search my content. So I was like, maybe I'll make like a series of YouTube videos or like maybe like a series of blogs. And then at that point in time, a publisher from Wiley reached out to me. This was January of this year and was like, hey, I think you've got a really great story. I'd love for Wiley to be the one to publish it. Do you want to write a book? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure about myself as like an author, but I know that Wiley is really well respected. It could be really cool to work with a publisher. And I already have all the content in my head. So I was like, okay, I'm going to New Zealand for 6 weeks. Can't write the book while I'm there. Can't even start. But when I come back, let's give this a shot. So they like wrote up a contract for me and everything, and I signed it. And then I started in March, and I said, okay, when I talked to them, I said, I want this to be my book. Like before I signed the contract, I said, it needs to be my book. It needs to be my story, because I think like ChatGPT can tell you what you need to learn to become a data analyst. You can find that anywhere. So I think what's really valuable about the book is that I tell my story. So I have like a whole chapter on like how it felt to job search and like how it felt to learn the skills. And then the rest of the chapters are kind of a combination of like, here's some resources, here's what, I think, and here's what I did. And then I have another whole chapter just on just the portfolio, which doesn't even like talk about my experience. So I kind of dip into all those things. And I said, like, I need to be able to tell my story my way, because that's what my content, like, that's what like has made my content successful. And they loved that. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll give this a shot. And the funniest thing about writing this book is that as I wrote the book, each stage of the book that I went through, I like experienced in my own life. So like as I was writing, the first stage was a year after I started learning data analytics. So I was like really reflecting on my year of learning. And then just as I finished the first section and got into the second section, I knew that I wanted to leave my job. So I started working on my portfolio. So the whole second section is about portfolios. And while I was writing that, I was updating, redoing my portfolio. And one of the like the portfolio projects in the book, I put into my portfolio for my second time around job search. And then I just started to get into like the third section of the book, which is job searching. And I had already kind of started job searching. And the day that I finished the second section and got into the third section, I got laid off. And I was like, honestly, kind of fortuitous timing, because I have a whole third section to write in this book. And at the time, it was just going to be 3 sections. So I was job searching like without a job the entire time I was writing the third section, which was super cool. And then I decided I had made a TikTok of myself getting laid off, and it has since gotten 2 million views on TikTok. And my publisher had seen it, and he had been like, super sorry to hear about this, but if you're comfortable, I think that you should add into it about like the layoff and the second job search. So I was like, okay. So then I like kind of knew. It took me like, I like the first job I ended up talking to is actually the one that I'm at now. And I felt good about it the whole way. So kind of like I finished the book as I was like finishing the book and like writing the fourth section, which ended up being like after you get the job, navigating imposter syndrome and preparing for a layoff and, how to succeed quickly, was just when I was kind of like mentally transitioning into that next stage. And I finished the book on my birthday, July 11th. And the editing and stuff took a while, but it took until December/January to finally be here. And it's been such an interesting kind of series of journeys.
That's pretty cool that, I mean, to some extent, that you got to experience like all those cycles as you're writing them. I think the biggest one that like really spoke to me was whenever you said that you wrote about the handling a layoff. I mean, I'm gonna knock on some wood right now, but it's something I've never had to go through. I mean, as a nurse, which is where my background is, for the people that don't know, but as a nurse, it's highly unlikely that I would ever get laid off, as working in a clinical setting. Now being in a corporate setting, working in data, it's more likely, but I've never been part of that. And it's something that I probably would struggle with a lot, if it were to happen to me. And so I think that's something that like does need to be talked about and how we handle that and move forward. And I think that's something that, again, now even the idea of, okay, you want to move into data analytics, this is how you do it. Okay, so you're in it. Now what? That whole section of what do we do once we get the job is something that's not really talked about. I mean, yeah, talk about like, okay, you learn to upskill, you learn to do this, that, another thing, but you don't ever talk about, okay, the first 90 days, let's discuss, like, let's have an actual strategy when we go into this job. Because with any job, like, you want to make a good impression, you want to optimize your learning, you want to position yourself to be able to take on whatever comes your way. And that's something that just isn't discussed that much. And I think that's something that's important. And I think that's something that most of these books or these workshops or these boot camps don't really prepare you for. It's all just leading up to getting the job, and then they kind of disappear.
Yeah. I mean, it was really nice to think about it because I think we all try and think about how to do well at our jobs. But because I was writing it into like an actual book, so I didn't experience much imposter syndrome with becoming a data analyst, but writing a book, oh my gosh, I was like, who's going to want to read my book? What if someone who knows a bunch reads my book and they hate it and they think all my opinions are bad? I had a lot of actually struggles with that. So for writing that section, I was looking at the profiles of people who like were much more experienced in the field and like asking. I'm pretty sure I asked you for feedback on some things too, because I wanted to be able to kind of more accurately represent it. I wanted to be able to talk about my story, but then also like do a good job telling the story. And so I learned, even just thinking about, how to what is your manager going to be looking for you to be bringing to the table on day one. And then like that's a very different way of thinking about it than like how can I succeed on day one, but like what does my manager need from me to be successful from day one. And so thinking about it in that way, I think was a good mindset shift for me. And like I think that if I hadn't been doing content creation when I got laid off, I'd still be thinking about like these things. But being a content creator and seeing layoff posts continuously were the reason that in February of this year, I said, I need to start looking for a new job because either I'm going to leave or I'm going to get laid off. So then when I did in June, I was like super ready for it. I actually was like relieved because I was so ready to go and I like kind of wanted to quit. And then they laid me off. And I was like, no harm done there. No bridges burned. Um, and so I think now at my current job, which I've been at since like mid-August, and I love it, and I don't feel any instability at all. I have a monthly document where I like keep track of the things that I'm doing and I'm accomplishing because I now know what it was like to get laid off and then be like, oh man, like that's like so many months of things that I need to like think about having done. And so now monthly I'm in there recording what was hard, what I did well, the relationships that I built, soft skills as well as hard skills, because I know how hard it is to collect those after the fact.
Yeah, and I think the one thing, like, just having listened to podcasts, and not that I'm a published author, despite having a book underneath my belt, but um, the one thing I've personally experienced, and I've also heard on podcasts, is that once you write the book, like, as time goes on, you either, one, regret something you put in the book, two, want to add stuff to the book to clarify it, or three, like, you hate the book or you love the book still, kind of thing. So that's one thing I would say is, if you're thinking about writing a book, I've also heard people should never write a book unless they truly feel called to write a book. But it's that was an odd thing I heard one time. But having said that, I think one thing is, like, for everybody that's on here, I mean, the basic theme behind all this is a side hustle. So um, uh, I would encourage anybody to get into a side hustle. I mean, it took me years to finally do something that would generate money outside of relying on my day-to-day job. And it sounds like it has to be something complicated, something groundbreaking, but like I said earlier, the first thing that made me my first dollar online was me literally curating free materials out there on the internet to learn data and analytics, and you just package it in a way that it helps people find it more easily. It's really just like, so you take out that middle step of that person having to go out there, find all this stuff, come up with a learning path and all that, and it delivers the end product to them without them needing to do all the middle part. And that's all a business is, really. You find something that people need, that they're willing to pay for at a good price, and you deliver it to them. So it's like mowing the lawn. A lot of people don't like mowing the lawn. So as a kid, you go mow the lawn, and people are willing to pay you for that because that's just something they don't necessarily like to do. So I would say, like, anybody that's out there that is thinking about, has an idea about a side hustle that they'd like to create, I'd say go for it. I mean, I've had flops. I mean, this year, despite being like a really great growth and learning year, I've also failed probably more than most years in my life. Not in like any major way, but there's been enough failures that uh, it's been discouraging, but it's also been a great learning experience too. And so I think for any time you have, like, you can't look at the people that are out there like a Justin Welsh on LinkedIn who's making millions of dollars a year because of the side hustle that he came up with, and now he's able to live off that. I mean, he started somewhere as well, and I think people just need to realize that it's an experience, and you gotta learn to enjoy the experience and that whole process.
Yeah, you have to also be like, you're putting yourself out there. I realized that I got my first review on my book the other day, and it was 2 out of 5 stars. No comments. 2 out of 5 stars, no comments, not a verified buyer. And I was like, it's okay. It's kind of funny,
Yeah.
actually. You're putting yourself out there. One thing I was interested to get your opinion on is this. I've always tried to make everything I do free because I got into data analytics for almost free, less than $100.
Yeah.
Um, but this balance of like my time and my experience is valuable, and also people who are trying to get into data analytics don't have very much money, and so yeah, I'm interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's hard. You because you do want to. I mean, as content creators, we literally put out free content almost on a regular basis, I should say. Um, and you know, it gets to a point where it's a lot of work, and it's hard to know, like, when you should charge for something or when you should accept a sponsored post. I mean, I still don't like accepting sponsored posts, but the last one I did paid for a new dishwasher. I mean, am I sorry? No, I'm not sorry. It was, and I don't, and I should caveat that by saying, whenever I do a sponsored post, I don't. It's always a product that is I vet, and it's a solid product. But having said that, it's like I don't like doing them just because I don't like feeling salesy, and I've never been a salesperson. Um, but I don't. Yeah, it's hard to figure out at what point you start charging for certain things, because and my philosophy is trying to keep it at minimal cost. I don't I don't want to make my stuff so outrageously priced that people don't have access to it. But at the same time, like, it is a source of income for me. It does help offset, like, all. I mean, if I were to step back and take a look at the hours and hours and hours that you spend creating content, answering comments, responding to direct messages, etc., and you look at the money that I brought in this year from my activities around that, I'd probably be making, I don't know, definitely less than probably $1 an hour for everything that I've done. But uh, yeah, I don't have a great a great answer, and I hope I didn't dig myself into a hole with everybody on here to by saying what I said.
No,
because
I feel it.
it's kind of like a taboo subject to talk about, like
It is.
it's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, um, I am very careful with sponsored posts because I think that my brand is what got me this job. It'll get me jobs in the future, and if I'm doing sponsored posts about things that people don't care about, then, like, that doesn't make me look good as a professional. But when it comes to, like, I wrote a book and then now you have to pay for the book, and, like, so I got paid in advance to write the book, which is great, but, like, unless I sell, like, I think 10,000 or 15,000 copies or something, I don't get any more money from the book. And so I just want my book to do well, like, because I put so much thought and effort and time into it. And it's all the questions I had when I was becoming a data analyst. And so I want it to reach the people who I wrote it for. Um, but at the same time, that means then promoting something that's not free. And so it's like it's like a mindset shift for me because I've always been like, I'll promote a product that's free. No problem. I'll promote like anything, all the resources that I point to are always free. I do all these coffee chats, I have my TikTok, my LinkedIn, my blog, all these things free. And now it's like I made a thing that is not free. And I don't even have control over the price. Wiley just priced it. But I worked really hard on it and I think that it is valuable. And I think it's like I it would have cut my journey in half. And actually, somebody who read the book already said if I had read this 9 months ago, it would have taken me half as much time to get to where I am now. And like, how much money is that? Let's say you get a 70K per year job. I don't even know. I can't do the math that quickly. Maybe you can, but what is the math of 4 months quicker, But it still feels like strange, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it is strange. um yeah, and I don't have a good answer because again, I always I always feel slimy when you get to that sales part of things. And there's definitely people that are just very natural at being able to talk through and say it in ways that don't feel salesy, and that's really where you have to get, is be at that point where it doesn't come across salesy and it's just you're advertising how it meets somebody's need, because that's ultimately what you're trying to do is give somebody something that is valuable to meet their needs and meet them where they are and get them to a different point. um, so it is very hard to try to push something like that after you've given all this free content and you aren't used to doing it. It's not like you're a business and you explicitly started to make money, so you've created this product that now you need to sell. So it's yeah, there you go, LinkedIn user, buy Annie's book.
Very sweet. Yeah, I mean, also something that I was curious about on a different thread of thought is, you've had your like resources, materials out for a lot longer than I have. So talk to me about like the feedback. Like, do people like message you and say like, I've had two people so far tell me that they read my book, and it's like, oh my god, tell me more. Like, here, you want a coffee chat so we can talk about it? But you've had probably many more of these, and so like, tell me about that.
Yeah, I've had a few people, and it's always nice to see that come across. Have somebody, even I mean, I don't know. I hate to say this, but even the bigger compliment is when they just compliment you on your content that you create. Because I'm not out there looking for somebody to come at me and say like, "Oh, it's great. I've learned so much." But um, I it's genuinely enjoyable to hear that feedback because in life you don't get much feedback with anything, and really, and so and usually the people that give you feedback on stuff, it's either, in my opinion, it's either fake feedback or two, it's negative for the most part. You don't get much positive feedback in life. Um, uh, that's been my experience, but maybe there's somebody out there that all they get is this great, glowing, positive feedback from people on a daily basis. But so that's why it's just a breath of fresh air when somebody gives you positive feedback on something that you've been brave enough and to put yourself out there to create, to put into the world. And if you pause and you think about it, there aren't many people that have taken that step and actually created something that is theirs, and put it out into the world and said, here, this is for you. This is to help you do X, Y, and Z. And I would like you to have it. And, and that's a big step. It's not like you're exposing part of yourself as a human being to people that otherwise would never have been known, and it puts you in a very vulnerable situation. I mean, this sounds all touchy feely, but I mean it's true. You don't. It is a very vulnerable situation to put yourself in. Even just content creation is very similar to that. You put a part of yourself out there that is exposed to, and exposing yourself in the virtual world is even more hostile. I mean, you open yourself up to a lot of individuals out there that are very much like hiding behind the virtual screen that they can just then troll you and do whatever they want. But yeah, I think it's why it's like just to sum it up, um, giving positive feedback to somebody that you respect the stuff that they're working on, you respect what they've put out there, can really brighten their day. It can even make their whole week, month, or year, just because it's not something that is common. I would say for every positive comment I get, there's probably at least 10 to 20 negative comments that come in about something or other. I might be exaggerating it, but um, it's the point is positive feedback is uncommon, especially in content creation or putting out products that you've created yourself.
Yeah. And have you been surprised at kind of the things that people say that they like? Like one of the people who read my book said they really liked I had made a video on YouTube to complement the portfolio section, kind of walking through like different stages of Tableau projects. And like in like their not super long comment about the book, like one of the things they specifically said is I'm really glad you included the video in there. And that was surprising to me. That was one of the big takeaways for them. So have you been surprised about the big takeaways or the things that resonate the most with people?
Not that I can think of. Yeah, I don't. I think that's an interesting thought. That yeah, no, I haven't really been surprised by anything that anybody has said. Wish I was.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm also asking you to like kind of catalog right now everything that everyone positive had said and then like think about it and reflect on it in the moment. Maybe I should have sent you a list of prepared questions. But I like that kind of specific feedback of like, "Oh, this thing was helpful," because then, like you said, when you read a book, sometimes you then later you're like, "Oh, I should have done this. I should have said this." Um, so now these are things that I can talk about in my content because it's not for me, it's not the book and then that's it.
Right.
Um, it's the book and then it's also the content and also the coffee chats and, I think I might like make a newsletter. And so there's like lots of opportunities for me to cover the questions and thoughts that people have in like a variety of different ways.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the positive thing about having that presence, that community that you can then continue the conversation with. I'll say like one of my favorite authors. They they wrote a couple books, and then I didn't realize it, but they had a podcast, and the podcast itself really is a continuance of the thoughts and the ideas behind those books, and it's been a very transformative, like, I guess, knowledge base, because it's not, like I said, it's not just the books and then you move on with life. Then you can actually like continue to listen to the podcasts and continue to learn about those concepts and continue to basically put those into your daily practice on an ongoing basis. So I think that's a huge component to books themselves, is that idea of being able to continue that knowledge by having an audience, by having another outlet that people can then follow and understand and learn from.
Yeah. But I think it also requires kind of holding true to the message that you want to tell because I think I see a lot of like bigger creators, not necessarily just in data, but all over. They get the critical momentum and then they just kind of go back to saying the same things they've already said, but I hear a lot, oh, you should be repurposing your content. All your posts that do well, just make that post again a couple months later, but just word it differently. And I get it. Like, there's always going to be a new influx of people into the space that didn't hear your original post, but I try not to be that kind of a content creator. I try and, come up with new things to say. And I think that a lot of the things that I've already said, a lot of people are like saying repeatedly. And so I don't necessarily need to cover them again.
Yeah, and that's hard because sorry, I'm sucking on a cough drop. I've got a cold this week. But yeah, it's hard because whenever you run into like writer's block, recycling content is a great way to push through that and make it to the other side, in my opinion. And I think that's probably one of the reasons I use it. It's not to try to generate um, more like the same. If it had a really good response the first time, I'm not trying to generate that again. Because the algorithm, especially on LinkedIn, is just all over the place. I don't. You can go look at my posts from the last 2 weeks. It's just been like, but
Yeah.
um, but it's for me the reason I use that technique of repurposing content is just to get through writer's block. And I'm not gonna lie, like I've struggled with that more recently, just because work, life obligations. I just don't have time to think about it. I don't have the time to. I don't have the hours to dedicate that I should dedicate that I would want to dedicate to put out quality content. And so that's been a struggle for me. But I think that's where I stand repurposing it. But yeah, and I don't know somebody that says the same thing over and over and over again. Like for me, I would just get bored with that and not be able to
Me
keep
too.
going that way. So I have to change things up, and sometimes it doesn't always resonate with the community that you built, which is tough because sometimes that's what you
Hmm.
want to talk about. Like I tried that
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, and it just wasn't clicking.
Hmm.
The algorithm was just off, but I'll blame my content stuff instead.
Yeah, I agree. You kind of get yourself into a niche and, especially people who are making money off of saying the same thing over and over again. They're not bored with the money. I want to check on the time. I know you said you until like 12:30, 12:45. How are you doing on time?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Okay. I saw one question in the chat that I didn't want to open up if you needed to go. I think this is a good one. This is a good one for you. It says, from your experience in data and in general, what are ways to provide positive alongside purposeful and constructive feedback to others when you're placed in such situations to do so?
Yeah. Uh, I think a lot of the time it comes down to clarity and communicating exactly what the issue was and what your expected outcome would have been what your expected outcome would have been if it had been the ideal situation. So if if you have, I'm trying to think of a good example, but if you had, I really can't think of a good example. Say two employees that are arguing with each other, and one of them escalates it. They yell at the other employee. I mean, you bring them in. You clearly explain to them that you cannot yell. This is a very contrived example, but you cannot yell. And my expectation would be that in the workplace that you need to behave in such a manner that our voices aren't escalated. And so I think that I would say that the temptation is for people to do the whole sandwich, the compliment, feedback, compliment sandwich, and I'm very much guilty of doing that with people. But the feedback often gets lost within those compliments because a lot of people walk out of the room. That's all they only hear the first and last thing you said primarily, and they only want to hear the good things that you said.
Hmm.
And so just being very clear in terms of this was the situation, this is how it was handled, and this is the expectation of how it should be handled in the future. And if there needs to be any any guardrails put in place, basically saying like if it continues, then these are the consequences. I think that's how you have to handle things from my perspective, because if you're not clear in what your expectations are, there's no way that the person can modify their behavior to meet those expectations. I think that's probably one of the biggest, outside of the compliment sandwich, one of the biggest things that we run into is thinking that we communicated clearly what our expectation is. And it's amazing the amount of people that think they did that and they have not done that, because so many organizations would run so much better if everybody just clearly communicated what what their expectation is. If your CEO is able to clearly communicate it down to your VPs, down to your directors, down to your managers, down to the frontline staff, you you would have a organization that ran so much more smoothly. Just understanding the intent and the direction that you're going, or opens the doors to everybody being able to do their job and move the organization in that direction. And it's again, and it's not, and when I say like communicating your intent, but it is simply communication. Communication is, in my opinion, the root of, I want to say all issues, but I won't say all issues. I'd say almost all issues, because you can, everything you look at, everything you go back to, it has to, like, there's some breakdown in communication that occurs at some point, that just causes total mayhem. So I think that would be my answer to that question with the, the feedback and everything.
Yeah. It's I like that you mentioned, like, not the sandwich because I know that I've heard the sandwich thing and, um, it's kind of definitely, like, my natural inclination. And I know, like, I really like constructive feedback, but also it really scares me. Like if my manager's like, I have, some feedback, which can mean positive or negative. And like, so like, my manager will like put in our one-on-one document, like, and generally just like, I think we could do this way. It's not even like positive or negative, but I'm sitting there like, oh my God, like I'm gonna get in trouble, like, and it's dumb because I know that I want the feedback, but just in the moment beforehand, I get nervous about it. But I do know that I had a good conversation recently with my manager's manager, and he talked about essentially, if you need to give feedback to somebody about, like there was something that you needed and they didn't deliver it, just tell them what the context was, what was expected, and what was delivered, and if needed, how that like what the delta was between the two of them. And it can be just like very matter of fact. And I think that I really like working at GitLab, and I think that like in general, everyone that I've experienced here has been like one of the cultural things that GitLab practices is like short toes. So to be able to just kind of clearly communicate the things. And so and we have like a lot of documentation. We like are very clear. We take good notes in meetings and like really document things in the Slack channels and stuff. And so I like that I feel like I know what is expected of me. And if I get into this territory of like, I don't know what's expected of me, I can ask it. And then like if we're going over like, oh, this thing needed to be done, but this wasn't met, it would be a real surprise to me if it's like, oh, I had no idea that's what you were looking for. And I'd be able to just like communicate that and we'd be able to like work on a remedy for that and then not get stuck on it, because I definitely have had situations in the past. Like, oh, in graduate school, I was constantly asking, like, I just need to know what you expect of me. Like, so that, like, well, how am I going to get graded on this paper? And they'd be like, well, figure it out. And then I'd get the paper back and it would be like, why would you do this? Basically. And it's like, because you didn't tell me, like, and I asked. And that's
Right.
so frustrating to me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's important that people feel that they can ask what the expectations are, because there are cultures where there isn't that security to ask those type of questions, which is extremely unfortunate, because they feel like if they ask those questions, they look like they're dumb and they can't, and they're not a competent employee. And, it's unfortunate, but it does exist.
Yeah. Let's see. What time is it? It is 12:45 on the dot. We're good now? We should go? You have
Yeah,
2 kiddos, right?
yeah, I have to
There's 2 of them?
go. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for chatting with me. Oh, and I wanted to spotlight, Jessica, thank you. Love to hear it. She just wrote on my book. Love it. It's coming out January 4th. So I don't have a physical copy yet. I will be getting a physical copy hopefully next week. And then I will hold my book that I wrote in my hands. And I put in the front of it like a little like dedication to my boyfriend, which he doesn't know about yet. And so I'm gonna see if I can trick him into opening it and reading it on his own without me telling him to read it, because then he can be genuinely surprised. But we'll see.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. But thanks for chatting with me. I think that this was definitely more kind of freeform, I think, than the last one.
Right.
Even
Yeah.
we just kind of bounced all over to a bunch of different topics, but it was great. It's super interesting. I hope that it was valuable to everyone here in the chat. Thanks to everyone who came too. We had a good chat.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the socials.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.